The security alarm on my phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m. Motion detected. Dock area. 3 figures moving through the pre-dawn darkness toward my grandfather's boat, bolt cutters gleaming in the infrared footage. What they didn't know was simple. I owned every drop of water they were trespassing on, and I'd been waiting for this moment for months. Let me back up. My name is Daniel Harper, 49 years old, 24 years Navy, retired as a Chief Petty Officer. For the past 8 months, I've been locked in a war with the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association, and their president, a woman named Victoria Sterling, who moved here from Phoenix 2 years ago with plans to transform our quiet lakeside community into her personal kingdom. But here's what Victoria doesn't know yet. The lake she's trying to control? My family has owned the mineral and water rights since 1979. Every single one of her power plays has been illegal from day one, and today she's about to find out just how illegal. The figures on my security feed were Victoria herself, along with 2 HOA board members approaching my dock at dawn like some kind of suburban SWAT team. Behind them, a sheriff's deputy who clearly hadn't done his homework about property boundaries. They were coming for my grandfather's 1987 Boston Whaler, armed with violation notices and the kind of arrogance that comes from never being told no. Victoria Sterling arrived in Riverside Meadows like a hurricane in designer clothing. Former real estate executive from Scottsdale. Immediately elected herself HOA president, and began what she called community enhancement initiatives. Translation: squeeze out the working class families who'd built this place and replace them with people who could afford her vision of lakefront luxury. My grandfather, Thomas Harper, bought what everyone called that useless wetland in 1979 for $6,000. Best investment he ever made. Not because of the 23 acres of Colorado wilderness, though that's nice, but because buried in those purchase documents was something the county clerk had missed. Complete water rights to Harper's Cove, the deepest section of what everyone now calls Riverside Lake. The morning mist was burning off as Victoria's crew reached my dock. Through my kitchen window, I watched her wave around a piece of paper like it was a weapon. Another violation notice, another threat, another $500 daily fine for keeping my unsightly vessel in community waters. Time to educate Victoria Sterling about the difference between community property and private property, and why you should never pick a fight with a Navy veteran who inherited more than just a boat. Victoria's harassment campaign started exactly 3 weeks after she moved in. No introduction, no neighborly conversation. Just marched up my driveway wearing enough jewelry to fund a small military operation and announced that my boat was destroying the aesthetic integrity of her community. That thing has to go, she declared, pointing at my grandfather's whaler like it was leaking nuclear waste. I've already had 3 potential buyers express concerns about property values. I showed her my dock permits, all current and legal since 1980, the boat registration, updated annually for 43 years, the property surveys filed properly with Mesa County and never disputed. I don't care about your paperwork, Victoria said, and I swear she actually rolled her eyes. This is a planned community now, we have standards. That's when I knew we had a problem. Victoria wasn't just complaining about my boat, she was testing me, seeing how much pressure it would take before I folded like every other original family she'd already driven out. But Navy chiefs don't fold. We plan. We document. And when someone tries to steal something that belongs to us, we make them regret it. Victoria formed the Riverside Meadows Property Enhancement Committee within a month. Fancy name for a group of recent arrivals who saw dollar signs instead of memories when they looked at our lake. The strategy was obvious. Pressure the longtime families to sell cheap, then flip the properties to luxury buyers willing to pay premium prices for exclusive waterfront access. My boat was just the opening move. 3 other original families started receiving similar harassment. The Kowalskis got cited for their vegetable garden being inconsistent with community vision. The Morales family was told their kids' rope swing posed liability concerns. The Hendricks received a demand to remove their fire pit because it violated aesthetic uniformity standards. Victoria's first major assault came during what she called an emergency community meeting scheduled for a Tuesday evening when most working families couldn't attend. The community center filled with her Phoenix transplant friends while the original families sat outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Her PowerPoint presentation probably cost more to create than my grandfather's entire boat. Slide after slide of community beautification initiatives and property value enhancement strategies. The proposal was brutal in its simplicity. All watercraft would require annual aesthetic inspections costing $750. Boats over 15 years old would need comprehensive restoration to modern standards, plus a new $3,000 annual watercraft fee for the privilege of using community waters. 26 newer residents nodded approval, while the 8 original families sat in stunned silence. Victoria had done her research. bringing charts showing how similar improvements had increased property values in Aspen and Steamboat Springs by 40%. But I'd done my research too. 3 weeks at the Mesa County Courthouse, digging through filing cabinets that smelled like decades of forgotten paperwork and broken dreams. My Navy training taught me that intelligence gathering wins more wars than superior firepower. What I found in those dusty records made me smile for the first time since this mess started. Victoria's little voting scheme had a fatal flaw. Colorado law requires approval from 75% of all property owners, not just whoever shows up to meetings, for new fees over $1,000. Her meeting had maybe 35 people in a community of 52 homes. The real bombshell was buried in the original HOA incorporation documents. Victoria's 2019 formation was missing signatures from 11 original homesteads, including mine. Those weren't suggestions. They were legal requirements that made her entire power structure about as legitimate as a $3 bill. I waited until Victoria finished her presentation before standing up. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry insects as I cleared my throat. "Ms. Sterling, I have questions about your legal authority to impose these fees." Her smile tightened slightly. "The HOA board has full discretionary power over community standards, Mr. Harper." "Actually, you don't." I pulled out a folder thick with photocopied documents. "Your 2019 incorporation is invalid. You're missing required signatures from 21% of original property owners as mandated by Colorado Revised Statutes 38-33.3 201. The room went dead quiet except for that humming light and the sound of Victoria's carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Furthermore, I continued, enjoying the way her face was changing color, the original homesteads have perpetual water access rights that predate your organization by 40 years. Victoria's response showed me exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Instead of backing down, she went nuclear. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut steel, "I've received multiple complaints about your aggressive behavior toward community members. Your military background concerns residents who fear for their safety." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Me? Aggressive? I'd helped half these people with home repairs, taught their kids to fish, plowed their driveways for free during winter storms. But I could see it working on the newer residents, the subtle poison that maybe the veteran was unstable, dangerous. "In fact," Victoria continued, sensing weakness, "I'll be filing a formal complaint with the sheriff's office. We have documentation of your intimidating behavior during community interactions. Brilliant and evil in equal measure. Turn my legal questions into threats. Make the victim into the aggressor while positioning herself as the concerned neighbor protecting innocent families from the dangerous ex-soldier." Deputy Mike Kowalski caught me in the parking lot afterward. His family had lived here almost as long as mine, but he wore his uniform with the careful neutrality of someone trying to serve both sides of a growing conflict. "Watch yourself, Dan," he said quietly, lighting a cigarette with hands that had worked ranching for 20 years. "Victoria's got connections downtown, political friends who remember her real estate donations." As I drove home that night, headlights cutting through mountain darkness, something was tucked under my windshield wiper. A note on plain white paper. "Check the water rights. Not everything is what it seems. A friend." The game was about to get very interesting. That anonymous note burned in my pocket for 5 days before I followed its advice. Something about "check the water rights" felt like opening a door I couldn't close. Once you look, there's no going back to ignorance. Victoria didn't waste time after the board meeting. Within 72 hours, she'd escalated faster than a brush fire in August. She formed something called the Riverside Security Initiative with a $75,000 budget raised from newer residents who apparently had money to burn on neighborhood warfare. The first sign of her new strategy appeared on a Thursday morning, private security boats patrolling the lake like we were running drugs instead of trying to fish in peace. 2 guys in matching uniforms and expensive sunglasses circling in a patrol boat that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. They'd idle near my dock for 30 minutes at a time, taking photos and making notes on waterproof tablets. Then came the signs. Big red warnings posted around every public area. "No unauthorized watercraft. Violators will be prosecuted." The legal language looked impressive for something with zero actual authority, but Victoria was counting on most people not knowing the difference between official and expensive looking. I drove to the state archives in Denver following that mysterious tip. The building smelled like old paper and bureaucratic coffee, and the clerk who helped me looked like she'd been filing documents since Colorado became a state. "You want the original water rights surveys from 1978? She asked, peering over glasses held together with tape. "Those are in the basement vault. Nobody's requested those files in maybe 20 years. The folders she brought up were thick as dictionaries and covered in enough dust to trigger allergies. But buried in all that paperwork was information that made my jaw drop like an anchor. Modern GPS technology has revealed thousands of boundary errors from the pre-satellite era, sometimes shifting property lines by hundreds of feet and costing property owners fortunes they never knew they had or lost. What I found in those archives would have made Victoria physically ill if she'd known. The original 1978 water survey showed that what everyone called Riverside Lake was actually two separate water bodies connected by a narrow channel that only appeared during spring runoff. Riverside Lake North, where all the expensive houses and Victoria's planned marina development were located, and Harper's Cove, a smaller but deeper body of water that, according to the deed I was staring at in disbelief, my grandfather hadn't just bought property next to. He'd bought the entire thing. Complete water rights, mineral rights, and navigation easements for Harper's Cove. The deed read in faded typewriter ink, all water rights and subsurface minerals for the body of water designated Harper's Cove, Mesa County Parcel 7834B. My grandfather hadn't just been a smart shopper. He'd been a visionary who understood that owning water in Colorado was like owning liquid gold. But Victoria was too busy playing dictator to do proper research. Her security escalation went into overdrive that same week. Surveillance cameras appeared overnight, pointing directly at my property like I was running a terrorist cell instead of just trying to maintain my family's legacy. The daily fines officially began, delivered by certified mail with the persistence of debt collectors and twice the hostility. That's when Victoria made her biggest mistake yet. She started spreading rumors that I was an unstable veteran who might pose a threat to community safety. The whisper campaign was subtle but effective. Concerned comments at the hardware store, worried conversations at the post office, always framed as caring about everyone's well-being. I contacted an attorney through the Veterans Legal Aid Program. Sharp woman named Sarah Martinez, who'd fought water rights cases across Colorado for 15 years. She reviewed my documents with the precision of a surgeon examining x-rays. "Daniel, you need to understand what you actually own here," she said, spreading maps across her desk. "In Colorado, water rights follow the doctrine of prior appropriation. First in time, first in right, a principle that dates back to the mining era and is still ironclad law." She confirmed what those dusty archives had revealed. I didn't just own a dock or lake access, I owned the entire water column, lake bed, and every recreational use right for Harper's Cove. That included the right to exclude others, the right to grant access, and the right to collect fees from anyone using my water. "Here's the part that'll really interest you," she continued, pointing to survey markers on an aerial photo. "Victoria's security boats are trespassing on your property every time they patrol. And those cameras, half of them are pointed at water you own." That night, sitting on my grandfather's dock listening to the gentle lap of water that apparently belonged to me, I could smell diesel fuel contaminating the clean mountain air. Victoria's security boats were leaking fuel into water they had no legal right to patrol, violating both my property rights and probably half a dozen environmental regulations. The crunch of gravel interrupted my thoughts. Unmarked vehicles had been driving by every few hours since the rumors started, and survey equipment with red laser dots danced across the water like some kind of high-tech intimidation display. Victoria thought she was tightening the noose. She had no idea she was walking into a trap 43 years in the making. Victoria's desperation reached new levels when she realized her Labor Day deadline was approaching and I wasn't backing down. Desperate people make stupid mistakes, and Victoria was about to make enough mistakes to fill a criminal complaint. The harassment escalated beyond psychological warfare into outright sabotage. My mailbox got vandalized twice in 1 week, smashed with what looked like a baseball bat and spray-painted with creative profanity that showed Victoria's supporters had limited vocabularies but unlimited hostility. Then someone sugar-loaded my boat's fuel tank, causing $1,800 in engine damage that my insurance adjuster said was definitely intentional contamination. Sugar doesn't dissolve in gasoline, it just turns your fuel system into expensive syrup. Anonymous calls to the VA claimed I was having psychological problems, triggering wellness checks that brought concerned social workers to my door, asking about my mental health and medication compliance. Professional, humiliating, and designed to create an official paper trail supporting Victoria's narrative about the unstable veteran. But Victoria's biggest mistake was scheduling an emergency community vote for the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. One agenda item: final resolution on watercraft violations and security enhancement. She was forcing a confrontation, betting I'd either cave under pressure or do something stupid that would justify her claims about my mental state. The acrid smell of controlled burns on neighboring properties mixed with diesel fumes from constant security patrols had destroyed the lake's peaceful mornings. The mechanical drone of patrol boat engines replaced bird songs with the sound of Victoria's paranoia. But that emergency meeting would be perfect timing. Victoria wanted a final showdown, time to give her one she'd never forget. The phone call that changed everything came from my attorney on a Wednesday morning while I was drinking coffee and watching Victoria's security theater circle my property like sharks in polo shirts. "Daniel, you need to sit down for this," Sarah said, and I could hear papers rustling. "We ran a background check on Victoria Sterling, and she's not just a former real estate executive. She's currently a development consultant." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. "What does that mean?" "Sterling Development Consultants. That's her company. She's got preliminary purchase agreements signed for 18 lakefront properties contingent on community improvements being approved. This whole HOA harassment campaign is a business plan. The pieces fell into place like a controlled demolition. Victoria hadn't moved here for the mountain scenery or small-town lifestyle. She'd moved here to execute the most sophisticated property theft scheme I'd ever encountered. I'd been stupid enough to think this was about my boat. Her investors are a Phoenix development group with a $40 million budget for something called Riverside Lake Resort and Conference Center," Sarah continued. "They're planning to buy out original families at panic sale prices, then develop luxury condominiums with a private marina charging $250,000 initiation fees." I'd seen this strategy during my Navy days around military bases. Target families with limited resources, pressure them with bureaucratic harassment, then swoop in with cash offers that looked generous but were actually theft of generational wealth. "Here's the part that'll make you angry," Sarah said. "Victoria needs your boat gone because it proves original homeowners have legitimate water access. If people see you using the lake freely, it undermines her entire narrative about requiring exclusive access for resort development." But the real bombshell came next. "Daniel, did you know your grandfather's deed includes perpetual easement rights across what's now the main community access road?" I nearly dropped the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means Victoria's entire development is impossible without your permission. Every construction truck, every resort guest, every employee would have to cross your easement to reach the marina site. You don't just own the water. You control the only legal access." Victoria's desperation suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't trying to remove an eyesore. She was trying to eliminate the single biggest obstacle to a $40 million development deal. "There's more," Sarah said with obvious satisfaction. "Harper's Cove is designated critical habitat for native Colorado pike minnow. Your grandfather signed a conservation easement in 1981 that provides tax benefits but permanently blocks commercial development. Federal environmental protection laws trump local development schemes every time. Victoria could build her resort over my dead body, but she'd have to fight the Endangered Species Act first. A legal battle that would cost millions and take years to resolve. That's when Victoria's attorney made the call I'd been expecting. The offer was delivered with all the subtlety of a mobster movie. $750,000 cash for a quiet sale, with veiled references to unfortunate complications that sometimes befell property owners who didn't understand community cooperation. 72 hours to decide, he said, before the community was forced to take alternative measures. I hung up and walked out to my dock, looking across water that belonged to me, protected by laws Victoria had never bothered to research. The morning sun turned the lake surface into liquid gold, and I could smell clean mountain air that her diesel-burning patrol boats hadn't managed to contaminate yet. Victoria Sterling had just made the biggest mistake of her scheming career. She'd threatened a Navy veteran who now knew exactly what she was trying to steal. Time to show her what real strategic planning looked like. The war room I established in my grandfather's cabin looked like a military intelligence operation, if military operations were conducted in wood-paneled living rooms that smelled like 40 years of honest living and pine smoke. 4 folding tables covered with legal documents, water surveys, environmental reports, and a timeline of harassment that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. My veterans legal aid attorney had connected me with an environmental law clinic at Colorado State University, and suddenly I had a team of graduate students treating Victoria's scheme like their personal crusade against corporate greed. The lead attorney, Professor Rebecca Chen, who'd spent 20 years fighting water rights cases, laid out our strategy with surgical precision. "We don't just want to stop Victoria," she said, spreading aerial photographs across my kitchen table. "We want to destroy her operation so completely that no developer will ever try this again in Colorado." First phase, Underwater Archaeological Survey. When law students have unlimited research time and access to state databases, they find things professional investigators miss. Harper's Cove contained artifacts from a Ute winter fishing camp dating back 400 years, triggering federal archaeological protection laws that made Victoria's marina development about as legal as strip mining Yellowstone. Environmental regulations are like icebergs. The visible part is nothing compared to what's hidden underneath. One phone call to the State Archaeological Commission brought a team of researchers who confirmed what the students had discovered. Harper's Cove was now protected under the National Historic Preservation Act. My neighbor, Ed Kowalski, turned out to be more than just a friendly rancher. The man had been organizing community resistance since before Victoria discovered hairspray, and within a week he'd created the Original Families Coalition, representing 9 households with 40 years of combined lake history. "I've been dealing with outside troublemakers since before you were born," Ed told me, adjusting glasses that had seen more county commission meetings than most politicians. "The best way to stop bullies is make them face consequences in front of everyone they're trying to impress." Deputy Mike Kowalski quietly provided something more valuable than moral support: police report numbers. Every false complaint Victoria had filed, every harassment allegation, every wellness check she'd triggered was documented in official records showing a clear pattern of abuse. When law enforcement starts seeing the same person filing reports every week, they get suspicious about motives. And when those reports never result in arrests or citations, they start investigating the complainant instead of the accused. The media strategy developed like pieces of a puzzle. Rebecca had connections with Denver Post environmental reporters who specialized in David versus Goliath stories where small communities fought off corporate predators. Victoria's scheme had all the elements of an award-winning investigation: environmental destruction, veteran harassment, corporate fraud, federal law violations. Local newspapers love stories like this, Rebecca explained while reviewing legal briefs thick enough to stop bullets. Environmental destruction, veteran harassment, corporate greed. It's everything readers love to hate. The technical documentation revealed the scope of Victoria's environmental crimes. Water quality tests I'd commissioned showed her security boats had leaked enough petroleum to violate the Clean Water Act in 23 different ways. Every patrol created measurable contamination that could trigger EPA enforcement, carrying $3,750 daily penalties. GPS coordinates proved Victoria's red warning signs were posted on federal conservation land, making her no unauthorized watercraft campaign an illegal occupation of protected habitat. While threatening to have me arrested for trespassing, she'd been committing actual federal crimes every day for 4 months. Financial warfare required different weapons. My attorney calculated damages that made my eyes water: $75,000 in harassment costs, $3.2 million in lost property value from her defamation campaign, plus environmental cleanup costs that could reach 7 figures. Victoria's Sterling Development Consultants was about to face lawsuits that would make her $40 million development fund disappear faster than morning mist on the lake. The Colorado Real Estate Commission complaint was particularly satisfying. Real estate professionals can lose their licenses for undisclosed conflicts of interest, and Victoria had been negotiating property purchases while simultaneously harassing the same homeowners through her HOA position. Professional ethics violations that would end her career even if she beat criminal charges. Evidence compilation filled 4 file boxes: 1,247 photographs, 37 hours of legal audio recordings, and financial records proving Victoria's company had purchased development permits before she'd even moved to our community. As I organized the final documents, breathing familiar smells of fresh ink and legal paper, I felt the weight of business cards from new allies, attorneys, environmental groups, investigative reporters, and federal agents who'd built careers destroying schemes exactly like Victoria's. The trap was set. Victoria just had to walk into it. Victoria's desperation hit critical mass when she realized her Labor Day deadline was approaching and I wasn't folding. Desperate people make catastrophic mistakes, and Victoria was about to provide enough evidence for a federal indictment. The first major error came at 2:30 a.m. on a Thursday when my infrared security system caught 3 figures dumping automotive waste near my dock. The night vision footage was crystal clear. Victoria herself, along with 2 HOA board members, pouring motor oil into pristine lake water while dressed like suburban eco-terrorists. I'd installed that security system after learning hard lessons during previous property disputes. Always document everything when dealing with people who think rules don't apply to them. The infrared cameras captured not just their faces, but license plates and audio of Victoria directing the operation like a criminal mastermind with a community college education. By 7 a.m., I'd uploaded footage to secure cloud servers and sent copies to my attorney, Deputy Kowalski, and the EPA Environmental Crimes Hotline. In Colorado, security cameras on private property can record 24/7 legally, and what they'd recorded was enough to charge Victoria with criminal environmental destruction. But Victoria wasn't finished digging her grave. That same morning, she filed a false report claiming I was polluting the lake with boat fuel. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. While literally dumping motor oil into water she didn't own, she was accusing me of the same crime. The EPA inspector who responded was a no-nonsense woman who'd investigated environmental crimes since before Victoria discovered Botox. She examined my pristine boat maintenance records and recent water quality tests, then started asking pointed questions about the fresh petroleum contamination that definitely didn't come from marine engines. "Sir," she said, kneeling by the water's edge with testing equipment worth more than most cars, "this petroleum signature doesn't match boat fuel. This is automotive motor oil, dumped here within the last 12 hours. Victoria's political pressure campaign escalated into something that would impress totalitarian dictators. She contacted county commissioners claiming I was a dangerous veteran threatening community safety, organized petitions demanding mandatory psychological evaluation, and planted fake online reviews questioning my military service record. Every move created more evidence for my legal team. Fake reviews violated federal laws protecting veteran service records. Psychological evaluation demands constituted harassment under Colorado disability statutes. County commissioners started getting suspicious when the same woman filed complaints about the same man every week. The collection agency Victoria hired to pursue HOA fines contributed to my case by attempting to place a lien on property through fraudulent board votes. Problem: you can't lien property that isn't subject to HOA authority. The attempt created paper trails of intentional property theft that would make prosecutors smile. False liens can be challenged within 30 days in Colorado and carry serious penalties including attorney fees and punitive damages. Victoria's lien wasn't just illegal, it was stupid enough to justify federal mail fraud charges. My homeowner's insurance launched their own investigation into the boat damage, and their fraud investigator was a former FBI agent who specialized in recognizing patterns. Within a week, she'd connected my case to similar incidents across Victoria's previous development projects in Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. "Mr. Harper," she said during our interview, "your situation isn't isolated. We've documented identical harassment patterns in Sedona, Park City, and Taos. Same consultant, same tactics, same mysterious accidents befalling homeowners who won't sell." The harassment reached absurd levels. Supporters parking cars to block my driveway, harassing phone calls every 2 hours, and posting my military records online in violation of federal veteran privacy laws. Each incident got documented and added to files that looked like evidence for organized crime prosecution. But the most satisfying moment came when Denver Post environmental reporter Jessica Martinez published the first article in what would become an investigative series. The headline read, "Development Consultants Harassment Campaign Targets Veterans Across 4 States," and Victoria's carefully constructed public image began crumbling like a house built on lake ice. Environmental groups provided documentation of similar illegal schemes, and television news crews started filming around the lake like we were a nature documentary about corporate predators in their habitat. The constant drone of news helicopters mixed with acrid smoke from photographers' equipment, creating an atmosphere that felt like a crime scene investigation. My attorney filed formal complaints with Colorado's Attorney General documenting financial damages, lost work from constant legal harassment, medical bills from stress-related health problems, and security expenses draining my Navy pension faster than Victoria could say community standards. The media investigation was building momentum like an avalanche, and Victoria was standing directly in its path. Victoria's final desperate move proved she'd completely lost contact with reality. She hired a private investigator to dig up scandals from my military service, apparently believing she could find something to justify months of harassment. What she discovered instead was enough heroic documentation to make her look like she was attacking Captain America. The PI's report, obtained through my attorney's discovery process, read like a military commendation ceremony. Navy Achievement Medal for Environmental Restoration at 3 different bases, multiple civilian rescue commendations for saving lives during off-duty emergencies, 24 years of exemplary service without a single disciplinary action. But Victoria's desperation turned criminal when she attempted to bribe Deputy Kowalski into filing false charges. The conversation happened in Miller's feed store parking lot, where Mike had stopped for livestock supplies and Victoria cornered him with an envelope containing $7,500 cash. "Just file a domestic disturbance report," she begged, according to the recording Mike made on his phone. "Say you received anonymous tips about violent threats. We'll work out details later." Mike Kowalski had been law enforcement for 18 years and recognized attempted bribery when he heard it. Recording such attempts is not only legal in Colorado, it's practically mandatory when dealing with someone systematically trying to frame innocent people. The FBI Environmental Crimes Unit opened their investigation after reviewing Victoria's harassment pattern across multiple states. Her Sterling Development consultants had been running identical schemes in Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico, targeting veterans and fixed-income homeowners with surgical precision. What I thought was personal harassment was actually a federal criminal enterprise spanning 4 states and involving millions in fraudulent property transfers. Victoria's Phoenix investors pulled funding faster than tourists fleeing wildfire when FBI investigations became public. $40 million in development money evaporated overnight when headlines started reading federal investigation into veteran harassment linked to multi-state development fraud. Smart money runs when federal agents start asking questions, and Victoria's house of cards collapsed with all the drama of a controlled demolition. 3 HOA board members resigned, citing ethical concerns about Victoria's methods, politician speak for jumping off a sinking ship before FBI interviews reached them. When board members abandon ship, schemes are usually beyond salvage. The whistleblower who destroyed Victoria's operation was her own assistant, a young woman named Amanda who'd been documenting illegal activities for months while secretly cooperating with federal investigators. Amanda provided recordings of Victoria admitting to environmental vandalism, property fraud, and conspiracy to harass veterans. My attorney explained during the deposition that would eventually send Victoria to federal prison. Victoria told her to plant evidence of fuel contamination near your dock, then call EPA to report violations. When Amanda refused, Victoria threatened to destroy her real estate career. National media picked up the story with the enthusiasm of sharks detecting blood. Development fraud targets. War heroes became cable news sensation, complete with environmental groups organizing a Save Harper's Cove campaign attracting supporters nationwide. My GoFundMe for legal expenses raised $127,000 in 60 hours from people who'd suffered similar HOA abuse and wanted to see justice served with interest compounded daily. Victoria's support network crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. The private security company stopped patrolling after learning they'd operated without permits on protected federal land. The collection agency withdrew fraudulent liens when they realized filing false documents carried felony penalties. Even Victoria's Phoenix attorney quietly abandoned the case after reviewing mountains of evidence against his client. In her final act of desperation, Victoria confronted me at Miller's feed store, the same place where she'd tried bribing Deputy Kowalski. She was waiting by my truck when I came out with dock repair supplies, her face twisted with the rage that comes from watching $40 million in dreams turn into federal felony charges. "This is all your fault," she screamed loud enough for half the county to hear. "You could have just sold your stupid property, but you had to ruin everything." 4 customers and parking lot security cameras captured her threatening physical violence, promising I'd regret destroying her life, and warning that accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. That night, someone spray-painted "Traitor" across my truck in letters visible from space. Store security footage showed Victoria's Lexus arriving at 1:45 a.m. and leaving 6 minutes later, providing evidence for vandalism charges that violated her bail conditions. As I called Deputy Kowalski to report the latest crime, breathing acrid spray paint fumes that still clung to my truck's metal, I realized Victoria had given me perfect setup for our final confrontation. She'd scheduled one last community meeting to present evidence of my environmental violations and force a vote removing dangerous elements from the community. Fine by me. Time to end this war once and for all. The Riverside Meadows Community Center had never hosted anything like the circus that descended on Labor Day evening. 300 people crammed into space designed for 75, with news cameras from 6 Denver stations, environmental reporters from 4 national publications, and federal agents observing from the back like silent guardians of justice. Victoria had no idea she was walking into her own execution. She'd spent the week preparing what she believed would be her triumphant final presentation, complete with falsified water quality reports showing contamination from my boat and staged photographs claiming environmental damage. The woman actually thought she could lie her way out of federal charges while FBI agents were taking notes 10 feet away. I sat in the front row with my legal team, watching Victoria set up her PowerPoint with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything in her privileged life. The projector flickered to life with her opening slide, "Protecting our community, final actions against environmental threats." "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor closing a murder case, "tonight we vote to permanently remove the environmental hazard threatening our beautiful lakeside community." She clicked to her first fabricated photo, my grandfather's boat with oil stains digitally added to surrounding water. The image was sophisticated enough to fool casual observers, but she'd made one critical error. She'd photoshopped pollution into water that belonged to me, not the community. "As you can see," Victoria continued, pointing with a laser pointer that trembled in her shaking hands, "this vessel has been contaminating our pristine waters for months." That's when I stood up. The room went dead silent except for the whir of news cameras swiveling to capture what everyone sensed would be the climactic moment of this entire circus. "Ms. Sterling," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority 24 years of Navy service teaches, "I have questions about your jurisdiction to regulate my property." Her laser pointer stopped mid-gesture. "The HOA has full authority over community waters, Mr. Harper." "Actually, you don't." I walked to the front and connected my laptop to the projector, replacing Victoria's lies with legal truth, because those aren't community waters. The first document that filled the screen was my grandfather's original 1979 deed, signed and notarized in ink that had faded but never lied. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the legal owner of Harper's Cove, my grandfather, Thomas Harper, who purchased not just lakefront property, but the entire body of water you've been fighting over." Gasps echoed through the room like thunder. Victoria's face went white as fresh snow as implications hit her like a freight train, loaded with 40 years of legal consequences. "Furthermore," I continued, advancing to survey results, "your proposed marina development would be built entirely on my private property, which explains your desperate attempts to drive me away." The room erupted in confused chatter as people realized they'd been watching Victoria attempt to steal millions in lakefront property through an elaborate harassment scheme. News cameras captured every moment of her world collapsing in real time. "That's impossible," Victoria shrieked, abandoning professional composure. "Those documents are fabricated by a conspiracy of veterans." Deputy Kowalski stepped forward with the satisfaction of a man who'd waited months for this moment. "Ms. Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a law enforcement officer, environmental crimes, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The handcuffs clicking shut around Victoria's wrists provided the most satisfying sound I'd heard since my discharge ceremony. But the real mic drop came when the EPA agent stood up from the back of the room. Mountain Vista Properties is under federal investigation for environmental fraud, veteran harassment, and racketeering across 4 states, Agent Rodriguez announced while Victoria struggled against restraints that weren't budging. "We've documented systematic targeting of military families and fixed-income homeowners through coordinated HOA abuse." The FBI agent joined the party by serving warrants for Victoria's financial records related to the harassment scheme. Federal agencies had been building a comprehensive case that would likely result in 8 to 12 years of federal prison time. But my favorite moment came when I made my final announcement to the packed room. "I'm offering legitimate community members lake access easements for $1 each, and I'm establishing the Thomas Harper Memorial Wildlife Preserve to protect this water forever." The standing ovation from original families and reasonable newer residents drowned out Victoria's screaming protests as news cameras captured her perp walk through a crowd she'd spent months terrorizing. Her $40 million development dreams evaporated like morning mist, replaced by federal felony charges and permanent disgrace. Environmental groups announced Harper's Cove as a model for community-led conservation, while the Denver Post reporter informed me her investigation series was being submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. Victoria Sterling had picked a fight with the wrong Navy veteran, and now the whole world was watching her pay the price. Justice served with a side of permanent humiliation. 9 months later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's dock, watching sunrise paint Harper's Cove in shades of gold and possibility, breathing air that no longer reeks of diesel from harassment patrol boats. The silence is broken only by gentle lapping of clean water against cedar planks and the occasional splash of Colorado pike minnow, the same endangered species that helped send Victoria to federal prison. Victoria Sterling pled guilty to 21 federal charges and received 30 months in federal prison plus $350,000 in restitution. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and Sterling Development Consultants dissolved in bankruptcy after facing lawsuits from investors who'd lost $40 million backing her fraudulent schemes. The harassment lawsuit I filed settled for $1.8 million, money that bought peace of mind and funded something even better. When federal plea bargains happen quickly, it usually means evidence was overwhelming enough to make fighting pointless, and Victoria's attorneys knew they were representing a client caught red-handed by federal surveillance. The new HOA board, elected from original families and reasonable newer residents, operates under bylaws requiring transparency, fairness, and actual legal authority before making decisions. Property values increased 35% after Harper's Cove received Colorado's first community-protected watershed designation, proving conservation can be more profitable than destruction. I used settlement money to restore my grandfather's cabin into a family retreat, honoring his memory while serving the community he loved. Colorado State University established a lake ecology research station in partnership with our community, providing ongoing environmental monitoring at no cost while giving students hands-on experience protecting pristine ecosystems. Harper's Cove now serves as a model for 18 other communities fighting similar development pressure across Colorado and neighboring states. My grandfather's $6,000 investment in worthless wetland became the cornerstone of a conservation movement protecting thousands of acres from corporate predators who mistake rural communities for easy targets. The Governor's Environmental Achievement Award sits on my mantle next to my grandfather's fishing photos, reminding me that sometimes the best way to honor the past is protecting the future. Original families saw property values soar thanks to permanent conservation protection, while the Veteran Property Rights Defense Fund I established helps other harassment victims fight back against HOA abuse. Victoria's spectacular downfall became a cautionary tale that inspired Colorado's legislature to pass the Community Protection Act, requiring independent oversight of harassment complaints and criminal penalties for systematic intimidation. Individual cases often spark broader legal reforms when they expose systemic problems, and Victoria's federal prosecution sent a message to developers across the West that targeting veterans carries serious consequences. The first annual Harper's Cove Conservation Festival attracted 3,500 visitors who came to celebrate community-led environmental protection while enjoying fishing, hiking, and educational programs. My grandfather's boat now serves as the festival centerpiece, transformed from Victoria's eyesore into a symbol of how ordinary people can defeat corporate schemes through determination and legal preparation. Environmental festivals generate significant tourism revenue for rural communities while educating visitors about conservation success stories, proving that protecting nature can be both morally right and economically smart. Local businesses reported record sales during festival weekend, with visitors praising the pristine lake and the community that fought to preserve it. Teaching weekend workshops on property rights has become my retirement passion, helping other homeowners understand what they actually own before HOA bullies try to steal it. Knowledge sharing creates lasting positive change by preventing future victims, and every property owner who successfully defends their rights makes the next Victoria think twice about targeting rural communities. The peace I've found through environmental education and community service feels like the reward my grandfather would have wanted. His worthless wetland purchase protecting not just our family's legacy, but an entire ecosystem for generations who will never know Victoria Sterling's name. Last week, I received a letter from a veteran in Wyoming whose HOA is trying to steal his solar panels through bogus aesthetic violations. Some people never learn, but that's fine by me. Time to make another phone call. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments. Your story might be next. And we love seeing justice served to petty tyrants who forget that Americans don't surrender family property without a fight. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed watching Victoria get exactly what she deserved. We've got plenty more stories where David beats Goliath, and trust me, the next one's even better. Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video. Drop a comment with your reaction and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.